students that are online with us turn their cameras on, does that have an impact on the connection whatsoever? Because it would be nice at this moment, at least, for us to see their faces, folks, so that we don't feel so, you know, isolated and alone.
Yes, I think we can try.
Okay, so those of you who are able to do so, would you please turn your cameras on so that we can at least get to see your faces and somehow start to get to know you a bit more? Thank you. You can do the same, Mika, right? Hello, Lourdes. I see that you're online.
Hello, Nati. Hello, everyone. Hello, Mika.
So thank you. Who's with us? Julieta Lucero. Hello, Julieta. Benjamin Pedroso. You were a student of mine in first year, Benjamin. Okay, there you are. Fourth year already. Manuela Centeno, student of mine as well. Right? Yeah. Okay. I cannot see the names of the ladies that I see at the bottom, but in any case, hello, ladies. Thank you for turning the cameras on. Okay, so the purpose for this session today is for us to advance with our syllabus, the content in our syllabus. And today in particular, the plan is for us to cover la estructura de la oración simple, el sujeto y el predicado, which is a chapter in the Tullius book that I hope you have already read, or at least are in the middle of this task. So first of all, I would like to share with you a presentation, a PowerPoint presentation that I have prepared for this session. So I will start sharing my screen so that you can see the slides. And later, after the presentation is over, I will give some room for questions. And so if you have the readings on hand, perhaps you would like to take advantage and ask any questions that you have, in particular related to the content that we are presenting today, okay? In case you have any other questions with respect to the content that we have already presented through video classes, well, you should follow the protocol that we have created for you to, you know, pose your questions and doubts. All right? So I will start sharing my screen. I believe you're actually seeing what I see now. Mika, can you tell me if this is so?
Yes.
Okay. So folks, this is the presentation and we're starting with it. I will do the talking, most of the talking. And as I said before, if you have any questions, jot them down there on your side, some notebook that you may have, and I'll address them when my presentation is over. So this is pretty much the chapter, the name of the chapter that the Tullius chapter 6, we're making reference to today. The overview of the presentation is, this one will be tackling types of sentences, predicates and arguments, the concept of the degree of a predicate, argument structure, thematic roles, the notion of the subject, and the notion of the predicate. Pretty much what, this chapter is about, and the most important notions in it that we consider most important. When it comes to types of sentences, the author explains that a simple sentence is a structure in which all of its constituents are phrases, that is to say, syntagmas in Spanish. A complex sentence is a sentence in which one of its constituents is a subordinate clause. So you have a main clause and a subordinate clause. And the compound sentence is a sentence that contains two or more coordinated sentences, oraciones coordinadas in Spanish. Now, let me show you a different classification that I have taken from a course that I took some years ago. And this is the name of my professor back then, Andrés Saab, and the credits for this specific presentation are owed to him. But I am making, use of his material now. Excuse me, let me get back. Here it is diapositiva 8. I'm sorry, but I'll need to get back. Okay. All right. Sentences. This is an additional classification for sentences other than the one that we have just tackled here. Simple, complex, and compound sentences pertaining particularly to the structuring that they have based on the presence of phrases only or sentences other than phrases. This other differentiation is in accordance with the speaker's attitude, and sentences may be divided into the following types: declarative ones, interrogative sentences, exclamative, and imperative sentences. And then another classification for sentences pertains to the nature of the predicate that we find in it or in them. So sentences may be called linking, following a copulative or linking pattern, intransitive, because the main verb is this type of verb, intransitive, or transitive. Remember that when you did first year grammar, you focused on sentence patterns. Remember that? And the pattern is very much, dictated or associated with the type of verbal predicate that is in use in the sentence. So this is for you to understand that the classification that we are presented with in the Tullius chapter is just one, and it pertains to the type of constitutive elements, right, that we find in sentences. Here we have a different structuring that pertains to the attitude that is associated with the speaker, and when the speaker is uttering the words that make up a sentence, or the pattern that the sentence follows in accordance with the verbal predicate, the main verbal predicate that it employs. Okay. I'll get back to my main presentation here. Now, let's go to this section. So in terms of predicates and arguments, an argument is a referring expression that points to an entity in the extra-linguistic world. Here we have a beautiful definition of an argument as a referring expression. So this is of importance. So it is an expression that helps us point to an entity. Now, here we have the extra-linguistic world, but we can also add a different notion here, which is the notion of universe of discourse. Because it might as well be the case that we're making reference to an entity that does not actually exist in the extra-linguistic world surrounding us, and still points to an entity that does exist somewhere else. Somewhere else where? Well, in the universe of discourse, in the world that we create by means of putting language to use. Okay? In any case, be the case that the entity exists for real in the extra-linguistic world, or it exists in a world that we have conjured up through discourse. An argument is an entity that refers, right? An argument is a role player, right? That points to an entity that exists, be it for real or not. Now, the notion of predicate is to be understood as a part of speech, such as a verb, an adjective, a noun, a preposition, that is key in determining obligatory constituents, right? A predicate is, I will delete that part, is a word, an entry. We can understand it as a word. We can even understand it as a lexeme, right? A theoretical concept that is associated with a dictionary entry, right? So it is not yet a word put to use, but it is a word that exists in a language. Now, when this word is put to use and it is, it becomes a member of a specific constitutive and larger unit, one of the units that it can become a member of is a simple sentence, such as, he gave the book to the girl in yellow, right here. We can see that this sentence is made up of different words, right? The words are follow a specific order, abiding by the phrase structure rules of linearity, of categoriality, and hierarchy that I made reference to in one of my video classes. So it's not just words put together, linearly, in a sequence at random, but there is a structure, there is a hierarchy that they're following. For example, here is a noun phrase that is following the specific order that we have in English, in which we find the head, and when the head is specified, the specifier comes to the left of the head. And here comes an important word, a preposition, right? That is marking, the necessity for it to be followed by a specific type of constituent, a nominal, a noun phrase in this case. And this noun phrase is following the order that, English noun phrases follow. So my point is, this sentence is made up of different predicates, different parts of speech, right? Now, in this specific case, of all the predicates that the sentence is made up, only one is said to be the predicator of this simple sentence. So you can have different predicates to speak of as constitutive elements for the same sentence, but only one of these predicates, in this case the verb give, functions as the sentence predicator. So a predicator here, it is any word we can function as a predicator of a sentence. That's not a very good definition. Let me go to my notes. My notes for this particular specific part of the theoretical content that I'm presenting is a book called Semantics, a course book, and which is the same source that we use to prepare some of the activities on predicates and arguments that you're asked to do in our handbook and that Mika will tackle today. So let me skip some of my notes there and let me go here. A predicate is any word or sequence of words which in a given single sense can function as the predicator of a sentence. So a predicate is any word, right? Or sequence of words that in any given single sense can function as the predicator of a sentence. What is the predicator of a sentence? We have it here. The predicator of a simple declarative sentence is the word, sometimes a group of words, which does not belong to any of the referring expressions. Therefore, the predicator cannot be a referring expression in the same sentence in which the predicator functions as predicator, and which of the remainder makes the most specific contribution to the meaning of the sentence. Intuitively speaking, the predicator describes the state or process in which the referring expressions are involved. Therefore, if we get back to our example sentence, he gave the book to the girl in yellow, we have already said that it is made up of different predicates, different words, different parts of speech, right? However, only one of these predicates is functioning as its predicator, which is the verb give. Irrespective of the tense the verb shows, the predicate is a verb in its infinitive form, give. And it is the semantics of give that establishes the obligatoriness of three of the arguments or referring expressions that it ought to be accompanied by in order for it to be in a grammatical structure, in a grammatical, canonical structure. One of the role players, yes?
Sorry to interrupt you, but do you want to tackle questions at the end, or do you want me to stop you to tackle questions?
No, I'd rather do my speaking and then I'll address the questions all together, if you don't mind,
right.
Folks. Okay? Okay, thank you, Mika. So, give, the semantics of give, as I was saying, establishes the requirement, the selection of he, in this case, therefore, the agent, the entity that, carries out the action of giving. Then the book is the presence of this entity, this constituent, is determined also by the semantics of give. For give establishes that somebody gives something, an entity that is transferred from point A to point B. And then to the girl in yellow, we can understand that the girl in yellow is part of this, word, the preposition to. But in any case, the argument in itself is the noun phrase, the girl in yellow, that functions as the recipient, the beneficiary, the entity that receives this entity that is given by he. We need to, at the level of the syntax, because we cannot have an English sentence that says, he gave the book the girl in yellow. It's not only a matter of satisfying the semantics of the predicate that functions as predicator, but it is also a matter of creating sentences that exist in English and therefore admitting to the incorporation of words such as prepositions to make the whole structuring of words a grammatical structure in English, a grammatical sentence in English. So it is not just a matter of satisfying the predicator's expectations and needs, but also a matter of creating sentences that satisfy the three phrase structure rules, and therefore admitting to the need that we also need to use a preposition to indicate the recipient, to indicate the beneficiary of the situation described by the predicate give. Now, this specific type of predicate, give, is a verbal predicate, right? So this specific type of predicate admits to incorporating in its morphology the categories of tense, of aspect, of mood. It can become an inflectional type of verb, right? Indicating such categories as tense, aspect, mood. Therefore, this is satisfying not only the need for the specification of the arguments, but also the need to have a finite verb in order for us to have a sentence. In this specific case, this predicate, functioning as predicator, in its very basic meaning, selects for then 1, 2, and 3 referring expressions or arguments. Therefore, its degree, that is to say, the number of predicates and the type of, the number of arguments and the type of arguments that it selects for is 3-place. So this is a 3-place predicate, or in Spanish, a predicado triádico. Okay? So let me get back to my definitions. Let's go here. Notice that predicate and predicator, this section here in yellow, are terms of quite different sorts. The term predicate identifies elements in the language system independently of particular example sentences. This is why I was telling you, and I was making this comment. Did I make a comment? Yes, it's right here. That I associated the term predicate with word, with lexeme, with dictionary entry. So the term predicate identifies elements in the language system independently of particular example sentences. Thus, it would make sense to envisage a list of predicates of English, as included, say, in a dictionary. The term predicator identifies the semantic role played by a particular word or group of words in a particular sentence. So predicator is a semantic function, a semantic role that is played by one of the predicates that a sentence is made up of, but is important in that given sentence in that it is the one that it is selecting for the number of arguments that the predicate functioning as predicator ought to be accompanied by in order for it to form a grammatical sentence. And also the type. Not only does the predicate functioning as predicator indicate the number of obligatory arguments, but also the type, but also the thematic or semantic role that each of these arguments is associated with. A verb like give specifies the selection for an argument like he that plays the role of agent. Only an agent gives. Then this entity given can be called patient or theme, as we have been using in some of our video classes in our model analyses that we have posted today. So we can call the book there, in terms of its theta role, semantic role, theme or patient. And then the girl in yellow, within the prepositional phrase to the girl in yellow, can be called beneficiary or recipient, as I mentioned before. There you go. Okay. Degree of a predicate. A predicator can attribute a property to an argument, or it can describe the existing relationship between arguments. So let's leave this part for later in a minute, but I will get back to this idea in a minute. Now, degree of a predicate is the number of arguments that the predicate functioning as predicator selects for. The degree of a predicate can be 0 place, 0 with a Z. It can be 1 place, it can be 2 place, or it can be 3 place. In Spanish, respectively, ceroádico, monádico, diádico, triádico. This is the list that you find on page 102, at least in the Tullius 2010 book. But it is at the very beginning of the chapter that we are discussing. Degree, and therefore then makes reference to the number of arguments that the predicate functioning as predicator selects for. Now, if we get back to the section in red now, we have been saying for some time now, Pinker's chapter 4 includes this information, and I believe that chapter 8 as well, that a predicate conceived of as a lexeme, as a dictionary entry, is not just to be associated with verbs, right? But adjectives, for example here, such as intelligent, may also be considered, of importance in the specification of arguments, that are required for a word such as intelligent to be accompanied by, in order for it to be part of a grammatical sentence. So intelligent is no longer a verb like give is, but still in this simple sentence of ours, Henry is intelligent, is also functioning as its predicator, for it is, of all the words that make up this sentence, is not a referring expression, and still contributes the most meaning to the sentence so that the structuring is grammatical. So it is intelligent, and it is the semantics of this word, of this adjective in particular, that selects for the existence of a referring expression such as Henry. And Henry here is then required for by the semantics of this predicate that functions as predicator in this simple sentence. Now, we said that the predicate that functions as predicator determines the number of arguments that it selects for, and also the type, right? The type, so the degree is in relation to the number, but the type of arguments pertains to is associated with the theta roles, or the semantic roles that these arguments are associated with. Inasmuch as give selects for an agent, such as he, selects for an entity that is given, such as a patient or a theme, and selects for an entity that receives the entity given, such as the girl in yellow, a beneficiary or a recipient, intelligent in its function as predicator, not only selects for one referring expression only, but also a specific type. Perhaps Henry could be associated with the theta role of, if we were in a presence-based context, I would be posing this question to you. But this cannot be associated with an agent, because when someone is intelligent, that entity doesn't do anything, but simply is. So perhaps we can call this theta role as the experiencer. Okay? This is not crucial, your establishment of an unequivocal type of theta role. There's room for divergence in your determination of the type of semantic or theta role that is involved. But what you must understand is that not only does the predicate function as predicator select for a specific number of referring expressions, but it also specifies the type of referring expressions that it ought to be associated with. In this case, Henry can never be understood to be an agent, or nothing is being said in terms of, the entity doing anything, but simply intelligent attributes a property, right, to this argument, Henry. And then, to get back to an important idea, since intelligent is different from give, in that intelligent is an adjective versus give being a verb, intelligent as an adjective cannot inflect for tense, aspect, mood in the same way that give, the verb, can do so. Therefore, the verb to be appears on stage to make it possible for intelligent and Henry to be in a structure that is called an English sentence, because we need to have a verb that is finite in order for us to have a simple sentence in English and Spanish, for that matter. Thus, we need the verb to be to contain, to function as the container of the non-verbal predicate, intelligent, which is the predicator in this simple sentence. Okay? We need the verb to be to function as the container of the nonverbal predicate, intelligent, which is the predicator in this simple sentence. Okay, the concept of argument structure is associated with the fact that the predicates that function as predicators in simple sentences select for specific arguments or referring expressions. So they have an argument structure as part of their semantic load, their semantic specifications. This is what I was anticipating in my previous slide. Each argument performs a semantic role, also called thematic role, theta or theta role, in Spanish papel temático, which indicates the participation of that argument in the state of affairs described by the predicator. So here we have, he broke the glass with the stone. So it is the predicate break, in this case, that functions as predicator and selects for 3 referring expressions, 3 arguments. Each one of these arguments associated with one specific theta role: agent, patient, instrument. Now, in a different arrangement, if we had the stone broke the glass, then we would have the same predicate, you see, break, with the realization of 2 of its arguments, and still have a grammatical structure. The stone in this case, instrument, the glass, patient. Take a look at, even when there has been a change in the syntax that these, arguments belong to, their thematic role doesn't change. So it is not simply because the stone has become the grammatical subject, the syntactic subject in this sentence, that it all of a sudden becomes an agent. It maintains the same role that break, the semantics of break, assigns to it when it is used in the more canonical structuring of all, in which you do have an agent, a patient, and an instrument. Even though when the agent here has disappeared at the level of surface structure from the syntax, the thematic role that we have for this argument, the stone, has remained unchanged. Possible thematic roles, the ones that Di Tullio lists herself: agent, experiencer, patient, beneficiary. She lists them on a footnote. Goal, source, location, instrument. We may have others such as theme. Theme is a similar role to that of patient. But we tend to use theme when the entity in question doesn't undergo a change of state. So, for example, in this sentence of ours, the glass here is a true patient, because when somebody breaks a glass or piece of glass, then it changes state. It undergoes a change of state. Okay? But in a sentence such as the one that we were discussing before, the book does not change in its state when it is transferred from this entity, he, to this other entity, the girl in yellow. Therefore, this could be considered a theme. But as I said before, you don't need to worry about thematic roles that much. what you must remember is particularly this, that these roles are assigned by the predicate functioning as predicator, and that they remain constant, they remain unchanged, even when they may occupy different places in the sentence and function differently, syntactically speaking. Okay, now the section on the subject of importance, we can have a grammatical definition associated with this, notion. The subject is a noun phrase or a nominal constituent, a nominal clause, because you can also have clauses, you see, functioning as syntactic subject. The whole predicate, not just the verbal phrase, refers to the subject. Therefore, the subject is, a special constitutive element in a sentence, because it is not just that, in this case, give, right? It's not just that give is associated with he as subject, but it's gave the book to the girl in yellow. It's the whole syntactic predicate that refers back to the subject. The subject and predicate agree in number as well as person, so this is what makes the subject, of a special type, because the verbal predicate, the finite verb, the main verb that we have in a sentence, shows agreement with the subject only, not with its complements or objects that come next, but just with the subject, agreeing in number as well as in person. And in English, the subject usually takes the initial position in the sentences, where in Spanish and other pro-drop languages, its position is not, let's say, as fixed as in English. It has more mobility, but it is within specific, margins, within specific rules that allow for the mobility. It's not just that we move it around in any way we want, but there's usually reasons that allow for this movement. For example, the specific type of verb that we use. That blocks agentivity. So for example, let me give you an example. If I consider here the example sentence, let me think. Enseño gramática, excuse me. A estudiantes universitarios. The assumption is that the subject, although it is not explicit at the level of surface structure, is to be understood as, pre-verbally located. Should it be located, I would go for yo o ella enseña. So it would be located there in the canonical place for an adjective, for a subject, to be in Spanish, considering that the basic arrangement for Spanish sentences is like the arrangement for English, SVO, right? Now, the verb enseñar is a transitive verb that selects for an agent, in this case, ella, or yo, understood to exist, given the inflectional morphology of the verb enseñó. And the order is therefore, the order that is expected the subject to take up is therefore preverbal. However, if we had a different sort of verb, say, gustar, and I said, me gustan los libros de ficción, Los libros de ficción is now the subject in this sentence, right? And it takes up a post-verbal position. And this me is an indirect object indicating the experiencer, right, of this situation of gustar described by the verb. Therefore, this is a different type of verb, different from enseñar, because this verb is an intransitive verb. Which type? An accusative. An accusative. And an accusative intransitive verb is always non-agentive. Agentive. So the specific type of verb in use, gustar, allows for the positioning of the subject post-verbally. So this is what I was, making reference to before. Spanish, the position of the subject in Spanish is not as fixed as in English. There's mobility allowed for, but within some norms, some, rules. One of these rules being the type of verb that is used in the sentence. Okay, finishing soon. Now, when it comes to the semantic definition of the subject, we can understand that this same notion subject can be ambiguous. It can be considered as one of the arguments required by the predicate or as an external argument not required by the predicate. So let's analyze this. When we consider this notion subject as a syntactic notion, we can understand that it makes reference to one of the constitutive elements of a sentence. A sentence is traditionally understood to be a two-constituent structure divided into a subject and a predicate. Predicate in a syntactic sense, as the constitutive element in a sentence that is not the subject, the other constitutive element. But subject can also denote semantically a specific type of argument. When subject is to be understood semantically, we can understand it as being synonymous for agent. So let me continue with this, what we have here. Llover is a type of verb in Spanish that is called impersonal. Impersonal in that it does not select for an agent. It does not select for an entity that carries out the action denoted by the verb llover. Okay? So then it is an impersonal sentence, and impersonal in the sense of the semantics of the verb in use, not selecting for an agent, an entity doing the action. Now, Di Tullio explains that there must still be a null category, and this is something that I also explained in my analysis that I recorded and posted recently. There must be a null category that we indicate with this symbol that helps explain the morphology of the form, of the verbal form, because we could have had llueven or llueves or something else, and still we don't. Therefore, there must be an entity, goes the theory, that explains the verbal inflections that the verb takes when it is used like this. How is it used? As an impersonal verb. In this case, there's no other possibility but to use llueve impersonally. Therefore, it will always have a third person singular morphology, right? But for example, with the verb haber, we know that haber, when it is an auxiliary verb, it does show agreement, different sorts of agreement. Yo he hecho tal cosa, tú has hecho tal otra, ellos han hecho tal cosa, vosotros habéis hecho tal otra, ¿verdad? So there you have different morphological variants of the verb because it is being used as an auxiliary form, right? Part of the compound tenses, for example, pretérito perfecto compuesto. Ahora, when haber is part of an impersonal sentence, for example, hubo manifestaciones toda la semana pasada, haber there is impersonal in that it does not select for an agent, and what you have is a direct object associated with it, or haber is un verbo transitivo. But still, to understand is that there must be something at the level of deep structure, something we don't see or hear, that allows us to understand why it takes una forma terciopersonal. Something must be there, and the hypothesis is that it is this little symbol, what the little symbol represents, a null pronoun, that helps us explain the morphology of the verb, because the verb still shows una forma específica, una forma terciopersonal. Okay? So, in this case, and in this case of hubo, the sentence does not have a syntactic subject, nor does it have a semantic one, because there's no agent selected for by these two verbal predicates. All right? In contrast, what we have in English is, semantically speaking, we have the same type, in this case, predicate, a predicate that refers to atmospheric conditions. It is also a verb that is not selecting for an agent. It is not agentive, but different from Spanish, we do have at the level of the surface expression a pronoun that we see and that we hear. And it must be there in order for the sentence to be English, to be grammatical. Therefore, this is a level of divergence between the two languages. For it is the same type of predicate, a predicate that denotes atmospheric conditions, and the degree of the two predicates is the same. It is a zero-place predicate. It does not select for an agent. Differently from Spanish, though, English must make use of an expletive pronoun, a pronoun it, expletive meaning without semantic load, for the sentence to be grammatical. Therefore, we speak of this sentence containing a grammatical subject, but no semantic subject, meaning no agent. And the predicate, this is my last slide. The head of the predicate is usually a verb because it has inflections that show subject-verb agreement, personal number, or that characterize the whole sentence, tense, mood, and aspect. So this is to be understood as one constitutive element of a sentence divided into two. a subject, syntactic subject, and a predicate, syntactic predicate. And the head of a predicate is the verb. The verb, remember first year grammar, the verb is the one signaling the pattern that the sentence will have. If it is a copular verb, the pattern will be of one type. If it is a transitive verb, it'll be of a different type. If it is a complex transitive verb, then it'll be of a different type. Now, predicate can also have a semantic interpretation. Semantic predicates, this is the notion that we started the class with. It is this, any word or sequence of words which in a given single sentence can function as a predicator of a sentence. So in this respect, a predicate is not just associated with a category verb, but we can also have adjectives, nouns, prepositions, and sometimes adverbs. Remember that we discussed this sentence, the Henry is intelligent sentence, in which we postulated that it was the predicate intelligent adjective that is functioning as the predicator of the sentence, and it is the one selecting for the number and the type just one argument and an experiencer in terms of type of referring expressions that it ought to be accompanied by in order for intelligent to be part of a grammatical sentence. And because intelligent is not a verb and cannot inflect for tense, for person, for aspect, for mood, we need the verb to be to contain this non-verbal predicate. Now, before I finish, I would like to refer to one exceptional case in which the verb to be can function as predicator in a sentence. We have sentences such as these two, the ones that I'm highlighting in green. Tony Blair was the prime minister. That woman over there is my daughter's teacher. So we have that woman over there. So the whole noun phrase. And then my daughter's teacher, another noun phrase, pointing to the same entity in the extralinguistic world. These two referring expressions point to the same entity. So this is an equative sentence, one in which we assert the identity of the reference of two referring expressions to assert that two referring expressions have the same referent. Okay? Now, just bear with me one more second and I'll finish in a minute. One special relation, the identity relation, is the one that I would like you to focus on. This is the relation found in equative sentences, such as that woman over there is my daughter's teacher. This is an equative sentence. So the identity relation, oops, where was it? Here, is found in equative sentences. In English, the identity of the reference of two different referring expressions is expressed by a form of the verb be. So it is only when the verb to be performs the role of, signaling an identity relation, such as in sentences 2, this is my father, 3, this is the person I was telling you about at dinner last night, and 5, the person I was telling you about at dinner last night is the man talking to Henry. This identity relation that is marked, in these 3 sentences, 2, 3, and 5, is the type of sentence in which the verb to be functions as this is the person I was telling you about. It is is to, and the person I was telling you about is, this is the only type of sentence, simple sentence, in which the verb to be functions as predicator, selecting for two referring expressions. This, my father; this, the person I was telling you about; the person I was telling you about, the man talking to Henry. In all other cases, the verb to be, when it comes to predicates and arguments, will function as container of a non-verbal predicate, such as intelligent, that cannot inflect, or tense, aspect, mood, categories that are needed in order for us to have a sentence. Okay. Let me get back to you. And Mika, we can organize the session for questions.
Yes. Antonella asks, can subjects be predicators?
First of all, who's Antonella? Can I see her?
Antonella Molina Gutierrez, I think she has
The camera off.
Uh-huh.
Okay, Antonella, don't worry. A subject, remember that subject, the term subject, can have two interpretations. One is syntactic, meaning one of the constitutive elements of a sentence. A sentence is divided into a subject and a predicate, syntactically speaking. And then subject, semantically understood, is to be understood as synonymous for agent. So this is why we speak of, sentences that are impersonales in Spanish, that select for no agent in terms of their argument structure, in terms of the verbals, argument structure, and have no syntactic subject either. In contrast, in English, we do have a syntactic subject incorporated because of the type of language English is. A language that does not allow for the dropping of subjects. Be these subjects notional, meaning with semantic load, or not. Because an expletive such as it has no semantic load and still is required by the syntax of the language so that the sentence is considered grammatical. So a predicator is a semantic notion that is at stake when one of the words in the sentence that we are considering is the one responsible for the selection of arguments or referring expressions that it must be accompanied by so that it is part of a grammatical sentence. Okay, have I addressed the doubt? The question? Any other question?
Is the predicate or the predicator that selects for arguments? Julieta.
You're welcome, Antonella. The predicate is a word, a lexeme, a dictionary entry. We can have a list of predicates of a language. In fact, we do. When we take a look at a dictionary, monolingual dictionary, what we have is a list of predicates, the list of possible words that exist in that language, right? But not all predicates that make up a simple sentence function as the sentence's predicator. It is only one. There's only one predicator per sentence. Now, it is the semantics, the meaning of the predicate functioning as predicator that selects for arguments. So it is the meaning of give, right? In isolation as a dictionary entry. Its semantics It's semantic load that determine that it ought to be accompanied by, in a very basic sentence, an agent, a theme, and a beneficiary. But give will only function as the predicator of a simple sentence when it is in fact, used the way I have postulated in my example sentence. Okay, as the finite verb that functions as head of the syntactic predicate. Because if we go back to first year, if I gave you the sentence, she gave her daughter money, or she gave money to her daughter, what you would do is try to find the finite form that determines the pattern for the sentence, right? And that type of verbal form that determines the pattern for the sentence is the very verb that we're speaking about, give. And give determines the existence of, within the syntactic predicate, two types of object, direct and indirect object. Okay? So it is the meaning of give that specifies the requirement for the existence of an agent, of an entity given, of a recipient, a beneficiary. But it is not always the case that give functions as the predicator of a simple sentence. You're welcome. Perhaps, Mika, we could do the practice session now because it is very much connected to this content.
Great.
And we can tackle more doubts later on.
Great.
So I will turn off my microphone and camera, but I'll still be here, okay?
Great. Perfect. So you for today, I assume that you're seeing my screen now. So for today,
yes, we are. Everything is fine.
Great. So practice 1, 2, and 3 were assigned to do and check together. So on this very first practice, what you're asked to do is to strip away referring expressions and the verb to be in order to identify the predicators in the following sentences. So once we identify the verb to be and which are the referring expressions, we can, or we have, which is going to be the predicate, selecting for arguments and acting as predicator. I assume you have the handbook with you. So sentence number 1 is, I am hungry. Here we have said that the verb to be is the one that is going to be stripped out, and we have to identify the referring expression. In this case, the pronoun I is going to be our referring expression. Is the part of speech that is pointing to an entity into discourse. So in this sentence, which is the predicator or the predicate functioning as predicator, is hungry. In this case, this predicate is a one-place predicate because it is selecting for one referring expression. This one. Sorry. This I only. So in this case, maybe if I paint it yellow, you would be able to see it better. So in this case, hungry is a one-place predicate, acting as predicator, one place. Joey is in San Francisco. Again, the verb to be is the one that is crossed out. And we have to identify, again, referring expressions. That is to say, which are the elements that are pointing to different entities into discourse. In this case, Joey and San Francisco. I think we all agree that these are the expressions that are referring to entities into discourse. I don't know why, if I am selecting yellow. Okay. I think, let me see if I can do it like this. There we go. So San Francisco and Joey are both referring expressions. So here we have in, the preposition in, the predicate in, functioning as predicator. This is a non-verbal predicator. We have already seen that we can have the predicates that can be functioning as predicators can be either verbal or non-verbal. So in this case, we have identified hungry, number one, as a non-verbal predicate. And in sentence B, the preposition in functioning as predicator, a non-verbal predicate. But in this case, the predicator is selecting for two arguments, two referring expressions. So if we have to classify the degree of the predicate, we are going to speak of a two-place because it is selecting for Joey, which in this case, we have already said that, as you have seen, all of the sentences contain the verb to be, so we cannot speak of an agent. In this case, Joey is not doing anything, but rather an experiencer. So we have one argument, which is the experiencer, and San Francisco, another argument, a locative, if we have to classify the theta role. So we will say it's a two-place predicate, Joey as experiencer and San Francisco as the locative. Yes? Let me move this here. So what happens in the mayor is a crook. Again, we cross out the verb to be, and we are left with the mayor and crook. In this case, the referring expression is the mayor only. And the one selecting for arguments, the predicate acting as predicator and selecting for arguments is another, it's a noun, crook, a non-verbal. Oh, sorry. This one, crook. A non-verbal predicate. Of which type? Which is the degree of this non-verbal predicate? It's a one place. Yes? A one place selecting for the mayor, which is an experiencer in terms of theta role. Then we have the man who lives at number 10 is whimsical. Again, we have to cross out the verb to be, and we have to identify referring expressions. In this case, the subject, the man who lives at number 10, which is a clause, is the referring expression. And whimsical is the predicate selecting for arguments, acting as predicator. a non-verbal predicate, and a one place. And the last one, the Royal Scottish Museum is behind Old College. So we have the Royal Scottish Museum, one referring expression, the Old College, another referring expression. So we are left with the preposition. The preposition is going to be then the predicate, selecting for arguments and acting as the predicator. A non-verbal predicator, selecting for two arguments. So it is a two place. Selecting for the Royal Scottish Museum, which is the subject and the experiencer, and Old College, which is going to be a locative. So, as you have seen, in most of these sentences, the verb to be is acting as what Natalia has already said, the container. Is the one providing or that is inflecting for tense, aspect, mood, providing the grammatical information needed for a sentence to be considered a grammatical sentence in English. And it is containing the nonverbal predicate, the actual word or part of speech or lexeme selecting for the arguments in a sentence. So far, so good. Any questions? Okay.
Mika,
Yes, Nati.
perhaps we could do a couple from practice 2 and a couple from practice 3. I believe it is 2 and 3 that we have left.
Yes, yes.
Because, well, it's taking a little bit too long. So
Yes.
we will leave time for them to, watch the videos at their ease, and then we can recap next week.
Yes. Practice 2 and practice 3 actually are connected, because in practice 2, you have to analyze the sentence in English, and then you have to provide the translation and make the analysis to see if there is correspondence or not among the languages between the two versions. So you have to identify, using the meta-language and syntax you are more acquainted with, which syntactic functions does each of these semantic components perform. Predicator plus arguments. So we have, Dennis is a menace. We have seen on the previous sentence that in most of the cases, the verb to be is not functioning as the predicator. It's not functioning as the word selecting for the arguments. In this case, we have seen with Natalia that for the verb to be a predicator, we will be in the presence of an equative sentence in which both elements will refer to the same entity into discourse. This is not the case. We see that then the verb to be is acting as the container. We see that Dennis is then, Dennis is a referring expression. Then menace is going to be our predicator. That is to say, the word selecting or the predicate selecting for arguments. In this case, only one argument, subject. So this is going to be a one place. This is going to be, or this is the rendition we have proposed. Dennis es una amenaza. If you see on the booklet, La estructura de la oración simple, on page 102, you will see that what Natalia explained as regards the verb to be being a container applies for English as well. It goes, no solo los verbos son predicados, también lo son los adjetivos, los sustantivos y las preposiciones. Como estas clases de palabras carecen de los rasgos flexivos, de concordancia con el sujeto y de tiempo y modo, requieren de un elemento gramatical que los contenga. Los verbos cópula, ser o estar cumplen esta función. So, we see then that Dennis is a referring expression. Is going to be working as the container, providing the grammatical information needed for a sentence to be considered a grammatical sentence. And amenaza is going to be then the predicate working or acting as the predicator and selecting for the arguments in a sentence. So we can see that if Dennis is the argument and amenaza is the predicator, it's a one place. In this case, monádico, porque estamos con la terminología del español. Monádico. We can compare with our English version. We have the same argument, one argument, the subject. We have the same predicator, the same predicate functioning as predicator, a non-verbal one, amenaza and menace. And we also identify that this predicate is a one place, because in both languages we see that the nonverbal predicate selects for only one argument. So if we take into account this pair, we can speak of correspondence. What happens with number 2? Fred showed Jane his BMW. In this case, we find that we have, instead of the verb to be, as we had on the previous sentence, we have the verb show. Show is a verb that selects for 3 arguments in this case. We have 3 referring expressions: Fred, Jane, BMW. In this instance, or in this sentence, we see then that our predicator is a verbal one, because it is a verb. It's the verb that is selecting for specific arguments. In this case, the arguments that are selected are Fred, Jane, and BMW. So we can speak of, if we have to analyze the theta role of these 3 arguments, we can speak of the agent that is doing the action of showing, Jane, that can be considered maybe the recipient or the experiencer, and the theme, BMW. So we have said that the predicator is then a verbal one and a 3-place predicate. In the Spanish rendition, we have Fred le mostró a Jane su BMW. We have the verb mostrar, selecting for, not sure if I can move down or not. There we go. So we have mostrar, which is a verb, therefore the predicate selecting for arguments and acting as predicator is going to be a verbal one. Selecting for, again, 3 arguments: Fred, Jane, y BMW. The same number and the same type of arguments as in the case of English. So in this instance, or in this case, we are going to speak of a verbal predicate and, in Spanish, triádico, selecting for 3 arguments. Having these arguments the same theta role as in English: agent, recipient, and theme. So again, we can speak of correspondence between English and Spanish. I don't know if you have questions so far. I don't know, Nati, if you want me to check another one, but
The schedule said that we would check practice 3 as well, or not?
yes, that's why. Oh, sorry. Yes, practice 3. I thought it was the translations. My mistake.
Let's do 3 quickly, and we finish with our presentation.
And then on practice 3, you are asked on the first one, you are asked in which of the following sentences does the predicate male function as predicator? And we have: the male gorilla at the zoo had a nasty accident yesterday. The gorilla at the zoo is a male, and the gorilla at the zoo is male. In this case, the predicate male functions as predicator in sentence B and sentence C. I don't know why. Sentence B and sentence C. In both instances, we see that the gorilla at the zoo is the referring expression. The verb to be is working as the container for the nonverbal predicate, which is male. And in the case of sentence 2, in which of the following sentences does the predicate human function as predicator, the options are: all humans are mortal, Socrates was human, and these bones are human. Again, sentence or options B and C are the ones that are correct. We see that Socrates and these bones are referring expressions that are pointing to an entity into discourse, and the verb to be, either was in option B and are in option C, are the containers for the nonverbal predicate. In both cases, in B and C, and in the case of the pair number 1, B and C, these nonverbal predicates are one place because they select for only one argument. In the case of 1, the gorilla at the zoo, and in the case of 2, Socrates for B and these bones for C. I don't know if you want to add something else, Nati, or if anyone has questions.
Okay, there's a question, Mika. I can read it out loud to you, or you can go to the chat. In relation to the example we would give from the beginning of the class, how should we analyze a sentence like, he gave his best? Mm-hmm. Is give still the predicator in this case? What accounts for the difference in syntactic and argument structure it has in comparison with your example? Is it because of some kind of difference in meaning? Okay, this is an extension of the verb, of the canonical, of the basic meaning of give. Emmanuel, I will address you as Emmanuel or Gonzalo. Say so in the chat, please. So what we are beginning to tackle is the basics, you know, Okay, Emmanuel, the basics that pertains to the theory on predicates and arguments, which is a semantic facet to the analysis of sentences. And what we're interested in is establishing the importance of, words such as verbs in particular, when they perform the function of predicator and they establish what the basic and necessary constituents ought to be so that they form grammatical sentences. Because with this information in mind, we can understand then what plays out in real life when using, languages, and putting, this capacity we have to use. But the focus is understanding what the basic structuring, semantic structuring, is like when analyzing sentences, so that from that specific place, we can move on to the analysis of the divergences that there may exist between the two languages we speak. As you know, and as everybody knows, what the words mean basically in their canonical representation is not what we end up using or end up, putting to use in most cases in our day-to-day, employment of Spanish and English. We end up, encountering and producing lots of idiomatic expressions, structures that are not so basic, but rather complex. Thus, Mika, you should stop sharing your screen, I believe.
Oh.
So, and they always have a sort of connection with the basic meaning, with the more canonical meaning and structuring of sentences, but they may involve some sort of, metaphorical extension, some sort of idiomaticity associated, to them that is not just explained by the, basic meaning that words and sentences ought to be associated with, but by means of other mechanisms, metaphor and, cognitive metaphors, just being one cognitive mechanism that we are all the time employing in our production and interpretation of language. So to give your best is a metaphorical extension for not necessarily are you physically giving anything when you give your best, but perhaps you are, doing a test and writing an essay on the advantages and disadvantages of living in a city. And you do a very good job at producing the essay itself. And what you have produced, in fact, is a piece of written material, and you haven't given anything, but still you can describe your having done a good job as you're having given your best. So this would be an extension, a metaphorical extension from a more basic and very material meaning of giving, which entails a physical agent producing the physical act of transferring an entity that is movable from one place onto another. And this very physical reality is then metaphorically extended into the realm of, say, making your best effort at a given activity, at a given job. So we would still analyze it semantically. Give is semantically and canonically will remain being a three-place predicate. Although in this specific realization that we find it in, we see it as a two-place, right? But this does not stop us from determining that this is still grammatical, for we can understand what give at its basic, level denotes. And from that basic level, we can understand what this extension points to. Not a physical act, and not that anyone is receiving anything, but rather it is somebody doing something very well. Do you understand? And we can get at this analysis only when we know what give in its basic canonical meaning is associated with. Only can we know that this is an extension, a derived expression from something more core, more unmarked, when we have mastered, when we have understood what the unmarked, what the basic, what the canonical is. Okay, I'm glad that Margarita, Mariana, and Emmanuel have gotten it. There's another question. Can we associate the notions of predicate predicators with what Cook states a person who knows the verb feign knows not only its meaning, but also how it is used in a sentence? Definitely, Mariana. Mariana, I think you go by Mariana. Yeah, so feint is a predicate. Thank you, Mariana. Feint is a predicate, a dictionary entry, a lexeme that we have in English. And we can have it in a specific sentence. We can have it used in a specific sentence. And in a specific sentence, it can function, this predicate can function as the sentence's predicator. So we can say, she fainted all of a sudden in the middle of the class. So I am using this term grammatically, meaning as a possible production in English, for I have used a specific type of entity, a specific type of referring expression associated with fainting. I've said she, for only an animate entity can be involved in the situation of fainting. So faint as the predicate has in its entry the specification not only of the number of referring expressions that it may be associated with, but also the type. It can only be an animate entity involved in the situation of fainting and not a rock. That I think Cook uses this idea of the rock fainting and him associating with this sentence the asterisk, for a rock cannot faint. You're welcome, Mariana. Okay, I would like to ask you guys now how you are feeling. I cannot produce live sessions every week. I have my child here next to me watching some cartoons, and everything is fine for the time being, but it cannot be taken for granted. She might appear on screen, and you will get to know her in a minute. But in any case, my situation is such that I cannot give live sessions every week. So that's why we're doing our best. And speaking of the example that Emmanuel gave us, we're giving our best to make up for this situation of ours that stops us from meeting like this every week. So are you feeling okay with those video classes of ours? We recorded new videos yesterday, producing model analysis of sentences containing the grammatical subjects it and their. And they're already uploaded on the YouTube channel for you to study with these videos and to understand what is it that you are going to begin being asked to do and say when it comes to analyses containing grammatical subjects in English. So are you feeling okay with those videos? I always try to make them short, but I can't. I always end up producing more than one video on the same topic, but this is me, again, giving my best. Emmanuel, you have given me the phrase of the day, because there's so much that I would like to say to you and that I would say to you if the classes were presence-based, that, well, I'm sorry that I'm making you watch more than one video, but there's no way for me to distill everything I must say to you in just 15 minutes. So that's why I cannot give you a live session and on top of the live session, make you watch videos that last an hour and a half. So we are, you know, compensating. You're not meeting with us like this every week, but then you're asked to watch the videos when you can. And I'm trying, and Mika is too, make them as understandable as possible. And then comes the protocol for you to post questions with your tutors, with your student helpers. So you're saying things on the chat. Thank you. I worry. I would like to make my video shorter. Haven't been able to tackle that yet. I'm glad to see that you're writing that they are an advantage, that are useful. You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for your understanding too. Not important. Okay. Okay. So at least we are on the same wavelength. Thank you. This is such a theoretical class at this stage, you know, at this time of the year, that I'm doing my best to summarize, but I cannot, you know, because I want to give you all I have, you know, at my disposal, so that you get your, you know, you get through the content as easily as possible. And the same with Mika, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so before we go, let me show you. So we have uploaded 4 new videos.
Mm-hmm.
One is Mika's here, the one that I am, you know, moving the cursor on now. Video 26. Oh no, that is mine. Where's yours, Mika? Mika.
Yeah, the one on your left, that one.
So video 23 is by Micaela MT. She produces 2 model analyses, one on it and the other one on there. And then I produce one on there, the use of the expletive pronoun there, and then 2 videos on it. So this will help you guys when producing your own analyses of sentences that contain these grammatical subjects in English.
And also on the virtual classroom, Professora Rolfi, Laura, she's not working with us, but with Patricia on the other groups, but she prepared a quiz or a test, or I don't know actually the real name, but if you go to the virtual classroom, I have left the website where you can access the game. Here it's on Moovit. Maybe you know the page. You can access the game with this pin 19782. It is like a recap on what we have seen as regards argument structure and the recognition of predicates and predicators and things like that.
So folks, for the time being, then we're going to finish this session. The recommendation that we have to make is that you watch those model analyses and that you start, finding your feet somehow when producing analytical content, not just explaining theory, but applying the theory when producing analyses, which is like another level of understanding. When you want to analyze using the theories that you have been, dealing with for some time, you ought to be able to just choose from the theory the content that is pertinent, that is appropriate, considering the case at hand. It's not that you will explain the whole theory on universal grammar, but you will only, apply from that theory that you're reading about the section that is really, really specific and that addresses the example that you're analyzing. But we cannot start our classes with us asking you to analyze without, us having this introductory, sessions with the theory being laid out in front of you and your own making of an effort to, grasp the notions, make them your own, and only then can you put them to work in your analysis. So this is the stage we're at. We're beginning to analyze. And this is the invitation that we make you now. Watch the videos in which we show you sentences and how we tackle them analytically, contrastively, and then you will start producing your own analysis, which is the most beautiful part, when you do it yourselves, okay? And I think this is it. Just continue taking a look at the schedule and see what is playing out next week. And as always, so far, we will be making the announcement in terms of what we will be doing on Wednesday next week. We will be making this announcement on Monday next week so that you can have time ahead of Wednesday to know what is happening on the very class day, whether or not we're meeting live, or if there's a video to watch, or if there's any assignment to submit, so on and so forth. Okay? Does anybody have any question, any other comment that they would like to share with us? I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're healthy. Your families are doing okay. This is a very long period, but I guess it's better that we stay home and do our best. Yet again, Emmanuel, give our best until we see the light at the end of this tunnel. So everybody okay? No more comments? Thank you, Manuela. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, right? And thank you, Luciano. We'll be leaving this class also, uploading it to the channel. So